Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist congregation at Shelter Rock on this balmy January morning. I'm the Reverend Ned Wight, the interim senior minister here at the congregation, serving with Natalie Fenimore, Jennifer Brower, who is currently on sabbatical, and Nancy Reed McKee, who I believe is with the sixth graders today. Great. UU Cafe today will be a special treat. Food is being prepared and served by members of the coming of age class. I believe it's lasagna. And it's going to raise money for their trip to Boston later this spring. So be prepared to join us for lunch. If you are the first-time visitor, please go to the visitor's desk and pick up a voucher for a free lunch this morning. The congregational meeting that's planned for today will happen at 12:45 here in this room, immediately after UU Cafe. Members should register to receive a voting card at tables that will be set up in the lobby. It's at 12:45. This coming week on Tuesday, the 23rd, in room 15, The Flame, a storytelling workshop with ministerial intern Nancy Reed McKee. This is a 4-week course that will take you through the process of how to identify and talk about meaningful events in your life in a way that's engaging and inspiring to the audience, a little bit like The Moth, storytelling thing on NPR. Next week is Beach Sunday, a very exciting time. We Resist, We Rise, with Taj James, the head of the Movement Strategy Center out in California, a panel of 3 community organizers. You won't want to miss that very exciting program next week. And finally, applications for General Assembly 2018 that will happen in Kansas City, Missouri, are available in the lobby and must be submitted by February 1st. So if you want information about that, Karen Krieg-Belfiore would, or anybody from the Denominational Affairs Committee can give you some information. Other announcements in your order of service, I hope that you will look those over and participate in as many of those programs as appeal to you. And now I invite you, as is our custom, to greet one another on this balmy winter morning.
bid you welcome who come with weary spirits seeking rest,
who come with troubles that are too much with you, who come hurt and afraid.
We bid you welcome who come with hope in your heart,
who come with an anticipation in your step, who come proud and joyous.
We bid you welcome who are seekers of a new faith,
who come to probe and explore, who come to learn.
We bid you welcome who enter this hall as a homecoming,
who have found here room for your spirit, who find in this people a family.
Whoever you are, whatever you are, wherever you are on your journey, we bid you welcome. We light our chalice now with words of Christine Robinson. We gather this hour as people of faith with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning in celebration of the life we share. Our opening hymn is hymn number 1, May Nothing Evil Cross This Door, in the gray hymnal, hymn number 1. Standing for the words of affirmation and the song of affirmation. The words are in your order of service. Love is the doctrine of this congregation. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve human need. This we do affirm and covenant with each other.
Peace.
words of one of our UU ministerial forebears, Arthur Foote, freely have we received of gifts that minister to our needs of body and spirit. Gladly we bring to our congregation and its wider concerns a portion of this bounty. The offering for the work of our congregation will now be gratefully received. Will the ushers please come forward? I invite you to join me in a responsive reading in your gray hymnal number 468, 468, back of the gray hymnal, George Odell's We Need One Another. And we'll be reading this responsively. You will respond with the italics. We need one another when we mourn and would be comforted.
We need one another when we are in trouble and afraid.
We need one another when we are in despair, in temptation, and need to be recalled to our best selves again.
We need one another when we would accomplish some great purpose and cannot do it alone.
We need one another in the hour of success, when we look for someone to share our triumphs.
We need one another in the hour of defeat, when with encouragement we might endure and stand again.
We need one another when we come to die, and would have gentle hands prepare us for the journey.
All our lives we are in need, and others are in need of us.
In these moments of quiet, I invite you to come forward to light candles of concern and celebration, joy and sorrow, remembrance and hope. We have 2 candle boxes. Please avail yourselves of either one.
As our reading reminded us, we are in need of one another. And so let us sit in the light of these candles with this great understanding. Spirit of life and love, who we call by many names, be with us in our time of need, our time of want, our time of grief, our time of fear. Comfort us as we comfort one another. Spirit of life and love, gather us together in moments of celebration, in joy and thanksgiving and gratitude. May we laugh and cry generously with one another. May we be one together in sharing our lives. May we be one in caring for each other, in being supporters and caregivers and cheerleaders, one to the other. May our hearts know each other and be filled evermore with loving kindness. May we learn of loving kindness from one another. May it be so.
be so. Well, it may be the easiest way to begin talking about civility is through our experiences of incivility. One Christmas, I was visiting my mother in Green Valley, Arizona, where she lived. I joined my brother-in-law for a little trip to Arby's roast beef to pick up some food for the family. It was a busy day at Arby's in Green Valley, Arizona, a lot of people milling around the counter. We got in what we thought was as close to a line as we could, and we waited, and we waited, and we waited. After 7 or 8 minutes, it looked like the end was in sight. Just then, a man came in the door on the side, walked behind me, walked over to the counter in front of me, and managed to arrive precisely at the moment when the woman behind the counter looked up. "Next," she said. "I'll have," he started to place his order. I was not pleased. I said, "Sir, excuse me, sir," loudly but self-contained, I thought anyway. He turned around and said, "Excuse me," and I said, "Excuse me, but we've been waiting here for quite a long time." He looked at me and shot back, "You're in the wrong line," turned around and continued to transact his business. I walked over to the side where the straws and condiments were and fumed quietly, more or less, for a while. Then I tried to make another foray to say that I just wanted to explain why it was that I was upset, and he shot back at me, "Well, you're just standing in the wrong line." Was it uncivil of me to bring my perception of his thoughtlessness to his attention, even to public attention? Was his obliviousness to the rest of us waiting uncivil? Fast forward, over the past several years, there's been considerable focus on the question of civility in our public political discourse. Rhetoric on the campaign trail, in tweets and remarks from our president, in the exchange of partisan insults and blame across the aisle in the House and Senate, name-calling, misrepresentation of facts, use of crude and rude language. Now, American political discourse has never offered the highest expression of civility. One has only to look at the name-calling and insults that were commonplace in 18th and 19th century political campaigns and policy debates. But hope springs eternal that this need not be the way of the future. Or is this current level of incivility on the American political landscape what we want as citizens? Alas, we've had challenges of incivility right here within our congregation. Members shouting at one another at congregational meetings, people characterizing fellow members as liars or people with nefarious motives, members reluctant or unwilling to serve with other members on boards or committees, people bearing grudges and hanging on to them for years or decades. Is this kind of interaction the one that we want to have with one another as members of a UU congregation? Well, all these examples go to show that civility and its lack are complicated. I learned what civility means from my parents. They taught me that civility was being nice to everybody, being polite, being a good boy. Boy Scouts had the key to this. The Scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. I say that to myself every night before I go to sleep. As Natalie mentioned in her sermon earlier this month, I too was taught if you don't have something nice to say about something, don't say anything at all. Keep your mouth shut. Now, this sounds laudable until somebody does something you think is wrong, or dangerous, or harmful, or hurtful. And then silence seems more like complicity than civility. And complicity and civility are not the same thing. Civility has its roots in the same word as our word for city, citizen, civics, civilized. It describes the quality of being with other people in community, cities, families, businesses, schools, the military, service clubs, synagogues, mosques, churches, UU congregations. In his book, A World Waiting to be Born, M. Scott Peck wrestles with the meaning of this term. It's hard to define, but it's one of those terms that we know when we come across it. It has something to do with intent, how people regard and value one another. It has something to do with communication, how people talk to and interact with one another. It has something to do with ethics, how people treat one another. It has something to do with power, how people exercise and share it with one another. Now, our UU principles should steer us in the direction of being models of civility. Our first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every person, the one behind this year's theme, worth and dignity for all. Justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, acceptance of one another, and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations, the use of the democratic process in our congregations and society. The words are there, the aspirations are there, the longing is there to experience this sort of community. We're all seeking some kind of respite from the pervasive incivility that surrounds us and hoping to find it at least here. Do we? Sometimes, but not always. So what happens in the soil of our congregations and our country that incivility flourishes and civility sometimes has such a hard time taking root? I think there's one basic reason for us to consider. We're so busy, preoccupied, that we forget. So anxious that we forget. So emotionally worked up sometimes that we forget. And what is it that we forget? The most fundamental thing. We belong to something bigger than ourselves. As individuals, we're part of something bigger. Now, UUs, as we know, are not always adept vis-a-vis the bigger than ourselves arena. We spend much of our time bickering over what we are going to call it. God, too traditional and oppressive. Higher power, too authoritarian. Collective unconscious, too limited and psychological jargony. Interconnected web of all existence, too abstract and impersonal. But genuine civility is not possible unless we affirm our interconnection with one another and allow ourselves a wide range of words and concepts through which we can make this affirmation. One big challenge for each of our UU congregations is to practice accepting our various clumsy attempts to affirm that we all belong to something bigger than ourselves. Call it humanity, call it beloved community, call it Gaia, call it the family of God. Our belonging to something bigger than ourselves means that we're all connected to one another. As John Donne said, or would have said if he could have used inclusive language in 1624, no one is an island entire of itself. Every person is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a clod is washed away by the sea, Europe is the less. As well as if a promontory were, as well as if a manor of thy friend or of thine own were. Anyone's death diminishes me because I am involved in humankind, and therefore never send to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. As in death, so in life, we are connected. Our fate is connected to the fate of others. That's why civility matters so much. It's a natural response to the conscious recognition of our relationship with one another and our connection to one another. We're able to be genuinely civil to one another only when we recognize ourselves to be intimately related to one another, sharing the same relationship with the unity, the one, whatever we might call it, that connects us all. Now I look out and I can see eyes glazing over. Come back into the room, they say. You're telling me, come back from wherever it is that you are flying. Return to earth. It's hard to find words for this bedrock of civility, this interconnection. But I think it's essential to find ways of naming and promoting it in our lives together. The practice of civility, the way we affirm this interconnection, is in highly concrete ways, day-to-day life situations. Steve Marsden brought to my attention an excellent guide to this whole subject. It's a book entitled Choosing Civility by P.M. Forney, co-founder of Johns Hopkins Civility Project. Here is how he characterizes civility. Being civil means being constantly aware of others and weaving restraint, respect, and consideration into the very fabric of this awareness. Civility is a form of goodness. It is gracious goodness, but it is not just an attitude of benevolent and thoughtful relating to other individuals. It also entails an active interest in the well-being of our communities, and even a concern for the health of the planet on which we live. And later he notes, civility does the work of empathy. It's one of the ways we demonstrate our respect for other people. He offers 25 rules of considerate conduct for our consideration. Here are just a few of them. Pay attention. This is fundamental to civility, since all civil and considerate behavior is rooted in awareness and mindfulness. Acknowledge others. The basic act of greeting someone shows that they are not invisible to us, that their existence and presence matters to us. Listen. The intention to listen and the practice of being an active, engaged listener go a long way to building bridges between ourselves and others. Speak kindly. This reminds us of the three-part mantra that Natalie mentioned in her sermon, Sounds of Love. Is it true? Is it kind? Will it help? We can choose to cultivate the capacity to imagine whether what we say or do will be perceived as kind by others, and strive to maximize kindness. Give constructive criticism. Of this rule, Forney writes, to criticize is a serious business and sometimes an awesome responsibility. Before you speak, make sure that your intention is to help with the problem and not to humiliate, manipulate, or exact revenge. And the final one I'll talk about today, don't shift responsibility and blame. And I thought about this particularly yesterday and today, as political leaders in Washington are falling all over themselves to point the finger of blame for the government shutdown at those in the other party. How much emotional energy we would save if each of us was more rigorous in owning our own mistakes and saying, I'm sorry. Our UU congregation are called to model civility beyond mere politeness. What might this mean? We have opportunities in our new member orientation classes to share something of our spiritual journeys and to listen to one another's stories. Marvelous stories, full of marvels. Wonderful stories, full of wonder. Stories of our lives told candidly in all of their raggedness show how much we all have in common. Encounters with pain, deep, gut-wrenching pain, life disasters have been part of every single one of our lives. So have moments of courage going on despite loss or grief or confusion. And likewise, testimonies of transformation, events happening that seemed like dead ends and turn out to be open doors. Telling our stories reveals the ties that bind us together. We need to continue to create opportunities to tell our stories, to speak our truth to one another. Speaking the truth in love, that is civility at work. Letting one another know where we stand and staying engaged in dialogue.
revealing both our pain and our appreciation of others, and staying receptive to their expressions of pain and appreciation, speaking the truth as we see it with an inner attitude of care for ourselves and the other person. I believe civility to be the work of our Unitarian Universalist congregations. The goal is to create a healing community where we can honor one another's talents and bind up one another's wounds. To create a healing community that serves as a model for others in a world that is broken, fragmented, contentious, and hurtful. This world needs our wisdom, our insight into interconnection, our demonstration of the power of civility to bind us together and to heal our brokenness. Practicing civility is our task. Mastering civility is our aspiration. Modeling civility is our calling in this movement and in our lives. May we be bold in answering this call, and may the unity to which we all belong uphold us in our efforts. So may it always be. Shalom. Blessed be. Insha'Allah. Aho Shanti. Amen. Our closing hymn in the Teal hymn number 1029, 1029, Love Knocks and Waits for Us to Hear, 1029. Please stand as your spirit and body allow.
If here you have found freedom, take it with you into the world.
If you have found comfort, go and share it with others.
If you have dreamed dreams, help one another that they might come true.
If you have known love, give some back to a bruised and hurting world.
Go in peace.